Just 100 left. A small group of Royal Bengal tigers are struggling to survive in the mangrove forests of Bangladesh. A unique conservation project is working to protect them, but many other species are in danger of disappearing entirely. I'm Shuli Ghosh, and this is Insight. Hello and welcome to the programme. Wild tigers once numbered more than 100,000 across Asia. Now their numbers are dangerously low as they're hunted aggressively by poachers for their valuable pelt, bones and teeth. And their habitat too is under threat as human activity encroaches on their territory. In the Sundarbans forest of Bangladesh, it's thought just 100 of the big cats remain. Insight's Sarah Firth reports now on a 4-year USAID project working alongside the government in Dhaka to protect the last of the Royal Bengal tigers.
These little guys were born in captivity. They're rare Bengal tiger cubs. They're also the world's most threatened species. Wildlife conservation organisations are warning that Bengal tigers might only survive in zoos by the end of the century. This is the Sundarbans, a vast forest in the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh. It's one of the last remaining habitats for big cats. But habitat loss and poaching has seen the Bengal tiger population drop. And it's thought there's only some 3,200 in the wild, according to the World Wildlife Fund. One group, named after the Bengal word for tiger, Bagh, is trying to raise awareness of tiger conservation and promote eco-friendly livelihood for the people near the Sundarbans.
While there has been much research done in the Sundarbans, there's still so much to learn about this ecosystem, on how this ecosystem actually works, how the tiger is surviving here, and if in fact it can thrive.
Part of that work involves tiger teams going out and camera tracking. This involves using hidden cameras in trees to record numbers.
Every tiger has its own distinct stripe pattern like our fingerprints. We're using cutting-edge tool and the latest technology, robust science to get the most precise estimate of tiger. For habitat monitoring, we have collected close to 200 plant specimens here. We are identifying some interesting information from those specimens.
The work has meant they've been able to get a much more accurate figure on the number of tigers in this area. It's thought that only 100 tigers still remain here. And that number could still drop further, but it's hoped organisations like Bagh, working with the government of Bangladesh to contribute to Bengal tiger conservation, can halt that. But the warning is clear, the need for action is urgent. Otherwise the Sundarbans, which means beautiful forest in Bengali, and its tigers risk being lost forever. Sarah Firth reporting for Insight.
Well, let's talk about this further. I'm joined in the studio by David Cowdrey, who's Head of Policy and Campaigns for the International Fund for Animal Welfare. Also joining us on Skype is Gary Franklin Collins, who heads up USAID's Bengal Tiger Conservation Initiative in Bangladesh, the BAG project. Gary, BAG, of course, meaning tiger. Your project designed to minimise human-tiger conflict and promote awareness campaigns over tiger conservation. Tell me what have been the biggest challenges for your project?
Well, our project is a $13 million project funded primarily by USAID, and we partner with the Smithsonian Institute. So we have money, but we have a shelf life too, where it's a 4-year project. We're at the very end of the project. But I would say primarily, once you get the funds, you can do the activities. The problem is when there's a lack of funds.
And very important work, because one of the concerns was that when you actually did your camera trapping, as you call it, to find out how many tigers there were in the Sundarbans, the number was actually lower than previously thought.
Well, that data is not out. We have, that is to say, the data we have, we're analyzing it right now, but we're not quite sure what the relative tiger density is in the Sundarbans. That's why we're doing research with the cross survey, these creek surveys, counting tiger footprints, which is one way, very ineffective, and that's been done in the past. But most recently, we've started camera trapping, and this is using sophisticated motion-sensitive cameras, and we take pictures of the tigers, analyze the tigers, because as my colleague Dr. Sharma explained, every tiger has a distinct marking, just like your fingerprint, and that doesn't change over age, ever. So we can identify the tiger, give the tiger a name, an identity number, and put it into a database and share that regionally with India in particular, so that we can keep track of the tigers.
David, the Sundarbans tiger is just one population that needs help. Across Asia, they have been hunted over the last 100 years to something like a decline in 97%. What is the picture at the moment as far as the tiger population goes?
Globally, we're looking at around about 3,890 tigers in the last census that was done in 2016, of which probably around 2,500 of those are Bengal tigers. Scattered across a whole range of populations. So for us, it is quite a bleak picture, it has been, but the good news was from 2010 to 2016, there has been a slight increase due to better increased survey techniques, more areas being surveyed, and also conservation efforts. The increase in conservation efforts and population control, population encouragement, we've seen those populations grow, but only a small amount. It's just the beginning, and there's a huge amount of work that needs doing. Yeah,
clearly a lot more to be done, and of course the problem facing tigers is twofold, I guess. One, the problems with their habitat dwindling as human activity increases, and two, the illegal trade in tiger parts, which despite international laws and conventions still continues.
Yeah, the habitat destruction is a really key part. I mean, we're seeing new roads being built, villages expanding, increase in population, and that fragmentation of the habitat is really creating a really bad situation for tigers. A male tiger will need between 150 to around 400 square kilometers to actually roam as a territory. You know, for Siberian tigers or the Amur tiger, that can be up to 600 square kilometers. So they are big ranges that they need. And as soon as you start fragmenting and breaking it up, as soon as you start deforestation, people needing fuel, building materials, you start to degrade that habitat. But also it impacts all the other prey species, so like spotted deer. So tigers rely on deer as their diet, as their habitat, in their habitat. And if people are then eating the deer, you have no prey species left for the tiger. And again, that can impact on them. And then, as you say, you've got the illegal wildlife trade, you've got organized criminal gangs coming in to do the poaching. And again, that's being used for traditional Asian medicines. It's being shipped across to different countries around the world at very high premium values. And again, the skins are being used, the claws are being used. So the tiger is facing a huge amount of threats, but there is good news at the end of the day. There's conservation efforts, there's anti-poaching efforts which are going on, which are helping to stop this at the moment.
Okay, let me turn to Gary, because one of the successes you've had with your project, Gary, is setting up the village tiger response teams. They've saved several tigers from being killed. In fact, they've won a major conservation award for their efforts. How important is it to get local communities on board?
Community engagement is one of the 5 pillars of the BAG project. And this community engagement started with the WILD team, which is a Bangladeshi NGO, headed by Dr. Islam from Dhaka University, the zoology department. But this is a good example of a local NGO that saw the problem of the potential extinction of the tigers and started taking action. They went down into the Sundarbans, into the peripheral villages around the mangrove forests, and they started a behavioral modification activity where traditionally, when the tiger comes into the village, people surround the tiger and the men beat it with sticks and they kill it. And then they sell the skin, the meat, whatever, but primarily the skin. So what we did was we went into the villages and we explained to the people the fact that the tiger, the apex predator, is essential in the balance of the Sundarbans. Without the tiger, the deer population, the wild boar population would explode. Then they would eat all the grasses. So the Sundarbans protects Bangladesh. And I think this is an extremely important point in talking about the tiger and the Sundarbans generally. Without the Sundarbans, and 60% in Bangladesh, 40% in India, the strength of these cyclones coming up from the Bay of Bengal will be doubled or tripled. The mangrove forest serves as a bulwark against these strong tropical storms. And already we're seeing massive devastation in Bangladesh from the storms. So if the mangrove forests are degraded in any way, then the storms will be stronger and more people will suffer, more people will die.
So saving the tiger has an ecological impact there. David, Gary's project working closely with government officials, how important is political will when it comes to conservation projects like this? Political will is vital, and those government partners that Gary was talking about are essential if you want to deliver conservation on the ground. For tiger conservation, I know that our partner, the Wildlife Trust of India, and their leader, Vivek Memon, is doing fantastic work. He's working with the Indian government, helping train rangers in those countries. Nearly 7,000 of them working in 100 parks. So that's a third of all the rangers that have been trained and equipped. So projects like that are really vital in trying to stop poaching going on, increase the patrols, but also that brings money into the park. You have more people, you have more protection. Because that's one of the problems, isn't it? That actually the illegal side of it, the trading in these animals, brings in more money than the legal side of it, protecting these animals. Well, tourism is in fact a really good industry. So, you know, by actually having these protection in these areas, but the part of the problem is that half the habitat of tigers, over 40% of their range, is actually outside protected areas. So again, that's something that we need to consider and look at for their future conservation. But where you're actually working with local communities, and the projects that Gary was talking about are really critical, doing that education, that understanding, so you don't get revenge killing of tigers. And again, so you have compensation schemes, so when cattle are killed, they're not going out and just killing the first tiger they come across. So for us, it's about not only the education, it's about the conservation, it's about the protection of the area, but it's also the forest, the habitat, and those other species. You know, a tiger is a flagship species for an area. It's symbolic for that whole ecosystem of protection. So it's not just protecting one animal, it's protecting thousands of animals. The whole environment. Gary, David saying that there is some good news. We've seen a small rise in the tiger population across Asia. From your point of view, your project is, as you say, time critical. This is the last year that it will be running. Do you feel it's been successful? What else do you feel has to be done?
I think it's been successful, absolutely. We've raised awareness of the importance of the tiger. I think that when the numbers come out, once we analyze the data, we may see a slight rise in the tiger. However, if we're talking about 100 tigers, realistically, any rise, even 4%, you're talking about mammals that the female takes a certain 3 years in order to be able to breed, and then there's gestation period. So we're not talking about fruit flies. This is long term. 100 tigers, but I think we can build on that. And going to the other conversation earlier, I think it's important to point out that India is leading the way. India has the most tiger reserves. The Prime Minister of India got behind the idea of saving the tiger. India is putting a lot of resources into these tiger reserves, and the biggest tiger population in the world is in India. So that has to be said. And Bangladesh is doing a lot. The Forest Department is underfunded, facing a lot of difficulties, but nevertheless, there is a will. And there are a lot of problems. You mentioned them earlier with the poaching, but efforts are being made, and we just can't give up. There's no alternative.
Well, Gary, it's clearly important work you're doing. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us about your project. Gary F. Collins there and David Kadri with me in the studio. You're watching Insight. Coming up, we're going to be taking a closer look at the endangered animals at risk of disappearing across the world. Do stay with us.